Welcome everybody in to Huskers Live episode. I believe it's 177, if I got that correct. And I am solo today. Yes, as you see, had a guest planned, but last minute change of plans kind of fell through. So it's me solo today, bringing y'all the latest. But we do have a lot of recruiting news to get into, good and bad. We'll get into a little bit of everything there, including the camp talk. A lot of talk about potential quarterbacks coming in to the fold. So we'll go through those couple of options they talked about that identified in the camp. And we'll go through a couple of the commitments and some of the future visitors to look out for coming up on the big weekends of June 14th and June 21st. First things first, my name is Justin Adams. As you know, I am a content creator here at Nebraska Football at the Voice of College Football. Also host Tuesday live streams. Again, apologies for no guest today. Fell through at the last second, one of those things, but we pivoted. Like I said, we got a lot of recruiting news that we can get into and break down for you. So I'm going to get into all that today. Drop your comments. Let me know what you think. I'm going to get into some of the guys that maybe you want to talk to or talk about and ask your questions. Let me know what you want to see and talk about, and we'll get to them. So, but a lot to get into. Let's just go ahead and start off the top. Adrian Martinez. Okay. Can we just get a round of applause for Mr. Adrian Martinez for really going in and making something of himself in the XFL after what many don't understand? Looking at the numbers that Adrian Martinez at Nebraska, of course, tore it up, but doesn't get a lot of the notoriety for just how talented that he was. Goes over into the XFL, leads the league, starts 7 games over there in the XFL, leads the league in rushing with 528 yards, third in passing with 1,750 yards, and started 7 of the 10 games. Like I said, 9-1 record. They are going to the championship in that league. So shout out Adrian Martinez. RIP. RIP. Oh, was it you? Yeah, USFL. I'm sorry, XFL. So I'm still stuck on the XFL. All right. I'm from Houston. I'm a Roughnecks fan. All right. And we got toasted by the out of the Roughnecks in the 2020 league because the Roughnecks were undefeated, and then COVID shut the league down. And then PJ Walker and a few other players went to the NFL. So the Roughnecks had a big struggle this year. So I'm just reminiscent about the XFL because the Roughnecks are terrible now. So, but really, shout out to Adrian Martinez. You love to see him go. Was in a tough situation in Nebraska. You love to see him go to Kansas State and have the success he did, and then go over to the XFL. And like I said, PJ Walker showed himself in the XFL a few months later. Once that league shut down, he played, and like y'all saw, he started for the Carolina Panthers. Like, he was an undersized guy, but really went out there and showed himself. So that does open an opportunity for Adrian Martinez to, who knows, maybe make a roster or at least get a shot at a roster here in the next few months. So now let's go ahead and get into, Fong Wei season's getting closer. Scott, appreciate you joining me. Jackson, as always, Jackson showing up, showing out, always the first commenter too. So now the post-grad camp. Now, a lot of the news that has come out of these post-grad camps was interesting. And if y'all remember, I posted a video about these post-grad camps and the difference in what Matt Rule has done versus other coaches in terms of how they're running the style of these camps. Now, Matt Rule has his own set of camps. It's kind of Matt Rule camps, and he's the only coach that when I was doing research for that video, I saw doing this style of thing. And he has specific focuses for his camps too, like most do, but most schools have the high school camps and the specialty camps and those type of things. Where Matt Rule has a nice mix of not only that, but he has a junior college camp. Like, if you look through the list of camps, there's a lot of, and if you go onto mattrullecamps.com website and actually look at the camps that he has, it's very, very interesting in the type of player that they're bringing in. And it's one of those things where they're very calculated, right? And this camp was a perfect example of that and how calculated they are, because, last June they found a couple of guys in James Williams and Luke Longval in that camp, and they ended up coming on as well. So this is something that isn't new to the staff. If you look at the year over year in terms of what camps they had last year versus this year, there's also a slight change. You can tell last year was more of a style of getting these guys in here that we can maybe get transfer portals in and stuff like that. And then the camps, the specialty and the design of the camps adjusted into this season for more of like a a high school type of thing, but also mixing in those those junior college post grad transfer camps, as well as I believe there's even like a special teams like type of camp in there. I'd have to jog my memory out. Like I said, I did a video on the camps a month ago or so, something like that. If y'all want to go check that out, there's some more details, and I broke that down a little bit more molecularly. So, but let's just go ahead and talk about some of the players that stood out. And I was listening to, there was a scout that was talking about one of the offers that went out, and Jacoby Clinton is a little brother of HaHa Clinton Dix. And if y'all remember, HaHa Clinton Dix played at Alabama, was a very, very good defensive back, played in the NFL. Now he played NAIA ball and took a year off of football, but came back in 2022, played 4 games, had a really good season. In 2023 was his best season, 50 tackles, 7.5 tackles for loss, 1 sack, 1 interception. He transferred to Valdosta State. I can't say it. Valdosta State. I should be able to say that because I was stationed near Valdosta in Georgia. But left this spring. No big time offer yet, but from the sounds of it, it looks like he is a guy who really, he understands. He's like, I'm not a perfect player. I know I have my faults. I know I have stuff I need to work on. But again, is one of those guys with experience that this staff, likes lineages. And if you have family members, brothers, sisters that were also athletically inclined, the staff typically will take a good look at you. So, he was out at the camp, and they talked about him, a little bit, but the majority of what we got to talk about was Jalen Gramstead and Bryce Conover, the 2 quarterbacks that came in. Now, again, Jalen Gramstead grew up a Nebraska fan. You'll probably heard all about it. Grew up a Nebraska fan, hates Iowa. So there's something that they love there. But really is only interested in either going back to where he was at the NAIA or coming to Nebraska. That's really it for him. That's what he's looking for. And so he's 22 years old, was the NAIA Player of the Year. In his career, over 6,000 yards, 60 touchdowns in 3 seasons. And last season, 33-8 in the touchdown to interception ratio, 70% completion percentage, 3,400 yards. And he's a dual threat guy. He's an athlete, ran for over 800 yards. Now, the flaws in his size, of course, what Matt Rule wants in a quarterback is somebody who's going to be able to come in and play multiple years. I believe he's got 1 year left to play, but he can also redshirt. Now, what's interesting about him is, of course, he has the more experience, but he was measured in about 5'10 and a half. So keep that in mind, 5'10 and a half, about 193. And it was one of those unannounced things. And what happened was he signed up for the camp Saturday and showed up there Monday. And the Nebraska, coaching staff, Glenn Thomas, got a really good look at him and Bryce Conover. Now, Bryce Conover played at Dodge City last year, 62 for 129, passing 634 yards, 5 touchdowns to 4 interceptions. He's younger, 20. So it's one of those things where you have Jalen Gramstead, who's going to be a guy that you'll get a year out of, but is more polished in terms of the quarterback position. But he's a little bit smaller, more of a dual threat guy. But then you have Bryce Conover, who's one of those guys that Matt Rule looks for in terms of being able to potentially develop. Now, the quarterback room, of course, they're not concerned about any of these guys coming over and taking, Raiola's spot or anything like that. But the depth has been an issue and talked about this offseason at length. And so what happened at this camp, that afterwards that indicates that this might be a thing, going forward. Well, essentially what happened was they showed up at the camp and, they ran through the drills and they got the attention of the guys. And of course, Jalen Gramstead showing up and being NAIA Player of the Year. It's no slouch. It's a lower league, of course, but Matt Rule's not afraid to take shots at guys like that. If he sees the talent there, if he sees the polish and the refinements there, he's got a good football mind. Gramstead does. So, Matt Rule, he had said they weren't closing the door on the idea of another quarterback. Now, when he says they weren't closing the door, that didn't necessarily mean they were looking. It was more so indicating that, like, if something like this happens where somebody comes in to the picture, into the fold, and maybe gets them, gets their attention, and is somebody that doesn't necessarily need to come in and compete for a starting spot, because that's the hard part. And bringing somebody in is, you can't really bring a guy in that's going to be extremely polished, because he's probably going to be one, especially if he has 1 year to play, he's not going to want to sit for a few years behind, or sit for that year behind a true freshman. So, but Jalen, accepted that challenge, and talking about it afterwards was talking about how, he doesn't want to be one of those guys that only goes to where he can come in and play immediately. He wants to be a guy who's going to go in there and works and gets the experience and is pushed to be his best self. And he probably understands, as a Nebraska fan, he understands that Raiola is probably the guy. Mind you, a couple nuggets. Raiola hit the crossbar from 40 yards out on the first try, and took him 2 tries from 50 yards out to hit the crossbar from 50 yards out. So a couple impressive throws there to mention. These guys in no way think they're going to come in and take over for his spot. Now, what it does do, and again, talking about Bryce Conover being a bigger guy, he's more probably around the 6'2" range. And then you got Jalen Gramstead, who was measured in at 5'10" and a half. So very small, but again, ran for over 800 yards. And what he brings as an athlete, is another thing that this team wants to utilize. And even if they don't utilize him, that's as if they bring him on, of course. Even if they don't utilize him as an athlete, what this does overall for the quarterback room, big picture, you have the opportunity now to make sure that in a worst case scenario, you don't necessarily have to burn Danny Kalen's red shirt, or you don't necessarily have to throw Danny Kalen to the wolves if that comes of this. You have a potential full year that Danny Kalen can work and develop. And Raiola is, of course, going to lead the charge, but it also opens up, Haarberg to be able to, maybe rotate out to tight end and get a little mixed into the tight end room like they want him to be. So there's a lot of things that can come off of this just in the depth. So while it is, it's the quarterback position of Nebraska, so it's making a lot of big news, and he's a very talented player, and the arm talent's there. Of course, the staff saw it, because what they did immediately after was they took them for a tour of the facility. So we should be hearing stuff over the next few days, maybe week, on this. But you got to think they're going to want to make a decision there quickly on who they're taking, if they're taking one, if they're taking both. But again, he's a football mind with experience that can come in this room and help mentor the young guys, because you have Haarberg there. But again, if you want to be able to, maybe move Haarberg, to the tight end room on occasion, maybe want to get him out of the quarterback room and into some other variations. And even Jalen Gramstead with his athleticism, maybe there's an opportunity to take advantage of his athleticism, again, since he's smaller than your prototypical quarterback. And especially Matt Rule talked about this before, where he wants those bigger quarterbacks, the 6'2", 6'3" guys that can be able to just really throw the ball into the wind and not have that wind, really take that ball. You have to have a strong arm, be strong in the pocket to be able to do that. But Jalen Gramstead, very, very intriguing. Bryce Conover doesn't have the numbers, like I said, but a couple years younger, may have a couple years to develop as more of a project guy, maybe a guy who's a depth piece. Now, one of the things that I did like about Gramstead, in talking about the football mind, he wants to be a coach one day. And one thing that we know about Matt Rule's staffs is he does tend to, use people that played for him and flip them into some kind of role on his team and or coach if he thinks they have that. So like, he'll probably come on as, if he was to come in as, a player, maybe a post-grad transfer, that type of thing. Those are the things that, like, you have a guy that potentially, even though he only has 1 year left, if you look forward and you maybe see him and you kind of pick his brain and you see him as a guy who could potentially add to this quarterback room in some kind of role like that and mentor, quarterbacks as they come in, you could see it as something like that too. So in the off chance that they take a guy with the 1 year of eligibility left, and he can also redshirt as well. So, like I said, after the camp, Shad and Patton took them for a tour of the Osborne Legacy Complex to see the facilities. And of course, they were blown away by those. They talked with analyst Adam DeMichelle. And so there's obvious interest there. DeMichelle was probably getting out there, picking their brains a little bit and seeing, what they thought and what kind of they brought to Nebraska and what their expectations were of Nebraska. But it seems like they'll have their pick of the litter if they do want to take one of these. And again, ensures Kalen can redshirt potentially, opens Harburger up to more roles. Even like I said, Gramstead can come on and take on, maybe move around a little bit. Now he's not going to play a bunch of different places, but you can package him into some things and maybe do some trickeration. And it's just another experienced mind one experienced player is okay. But if you have two experienced quarterbacks who are used to seeing, the next level, albeit at a much lower level, but still understand some of the concepts of the next level, that's really going to help these young guys out. So whatever way you slice it, it's good to see, and it's good to have options now at the quarterback position. So now let's get into a little bit of the offer that was kind of under the radar in Tyrell Russell. Now, listening to the scouts about Tyrell Russell out there, they said he was making plays on both sides of the ball. And Nebraska was his first Power 5 offer. Michigan State and Rutgers apparently showed interest after Nebraska offered, but he's a track guy. Evan Cooper worked with him on cornerback technique. So that was, I forget the scout that I talked to about that. So, he plays running back in high school, but they're wanting to get him potentially out as a defensive back, which would make sense because, a lot of the balance and footwork stuff that goes into running back can help you transition over to a defensive back. You're just doing a lot of stuff backwards now. But a very versatile guy. It seems like they said, they had to keep their eye on him, making plays all over the field. So there's another one to look into there. Tyrell Russell, again, flying under the radar. Now, I went into a couple of guys, and I'm curious to y'all's take on, because I did some film studies on, Jamarian Parker, Pierce Muber, and I'm going to get into those guys here as well. But give me some of the guys that have committed that you're most excited about, or visiting that you're most excited about in the June 14th or 21st weekend, so I can go into them as well. But I got some guys to break down here for you. Now we're going to go into the commitments. Now we'll go into the bad news first, and indications of bad news that has not yet been bad news, but Broderick Scholl was the first bit of bad news. Now, I did a film study on Broderick Scholl, and Broderick Scholl to me was very intriguing because he is one of those he's a movement tackle or movement guard. Sorry. So he's very good for zone run schemes. He's very good at, if you want to get a lot of movement in the backfield, you pull your guards. He had good balance, a good base and stuff like that, good speed, good footwork. But with Nebraska, it was one of those things. It seemed like he went to Auburn, because he was the highest ranked recruit currently of Auburn's class after he committed. And it seems like Auburn kind of put the full court press onto Broderick. And, he said he felt everything was right at Auburn. Like I said, they kind of laid the full court press out for him, and their vision and their style of football and the play that they wanted to do really fit to what he wanted to do. And so you got Nebraska looking at a couple of different style of tackle and guards here. So you have, and we'll get into the next guy that they may push to after missing out on Broderick Scholl in a second. But Broderick Scholl is one of those longer, rangier guards who's going to be more athletic. And like I said, he's going to be able to pull. He's going to be able to set the edges, good footwork and stuff like that. But the pivot that I've heard about potentially maybe making a push for on the heels of the Broderick Scholl news is John Mills. Now, Mills, 16 years old at 6'6", 320 pounds. He's an 88 rated 3-star. And, he's a big framed guy, right? 6'6", 320. He's a big guy, but he does move fairly well for his size. Now, if you look at his film and his footwork, you're not going to see like a David Sanders type of guy who I'll get into in just a second. Like a David Sanders is massive, but moves almost like a Broderick Scholl type of a guard. And so that is why, though, he is one of the top recruits in the country in David Sanders. Now, with John Mills, he's a little bit less refined in terms of footwork and moving well for his size, but a couple of the things that Matt Rule and the staff like to do is they look for those things that can be developed, but what does he do in terms of, his motor? What does he do in terms of if he's overmatching the opponent? What does he do in those situations? And in his film, he basically bullies anybody who's got a size advantage on, bullies them, but bullies them all the way to the ground. And so he finishes plays. He's very physical. And one of the things that he does is he gets upfield. So if he lays a block, right, and cements that block, gets upfield, he's able to he keeps his eyes up and he keeps looking for the next block. So you'll see him jump from his guy, gets his guy out of the play, step up to the next level, get that guy, but he's able to kind of stay out of the mud too. What you want in an offensive lineman is a guy who can get through the mud and stay on his feet. You don't want linemen that can't stay on their feet, because that is an indication of bad footwork, bad balance. So one of the things that Mills does when you see him leave his feet, it's basically because he's pancaking somebody to the ground, but he always keeps his eyes up, always looking for somebody to block. So if they were to pivot to a guy like John Mills, again, I think they're a little bit of a different style. Broderick Scholl is a little bit more of a zone type of guard, whereas Mills is looking more of like a bigger, beefier type of guy, but he can also move and do a little bit of the other things that you want him to do. So again, it hurt to lose out on Broderick Scholl, but maybe push for John Mills. And there's, like I said, a couple more guys that I'll get into in a little bit in the lineman front here. Now let's talk about David Sanders for just a second. Sorry, to drink water. David Sanders. So there was a lot of excitement around David Sanders, of course. Getting him to campus was a win in and of itself. And I know we don't necessarily like to hear getting somebody to campus was a win, right? But David Sanders, again, one of the most sought after players. He's the top player. Think about it this way. He's the top player in every single one of these big schools recruiting classes that is offering him. Now, Nebraska was late getting in the picture to him and was still able to land a visit. And it's indicating there's a couple of different schools pulling away. But when listening to David Sanders' interview that they did with him, David was very much in tune with the connection that he had with Dylan. Because when Dylan was at Georgia, David Sanders, of course, is one of Georgia's top prospects as well. So when that happened, he kind of communicated with him and the staff got in on the action. So David Sanders, Nebraska was a little late getting on him. And that probably hurt them because they weren't able to build that relationship like they wanted. Again, we're not out on David Sanders, but he's pulling a different direction. Now, with David Sanders, he's a connection guy, but at the same time, he's connected to Raiola, but he's also close with Mason Short. Mason Short is already a Georgia commit. They took a lot of their visits together. And actually, David is going with Mason, Mason is going unofficially to visit with Georgia when David goes, because he's also trying to get him over to Georgia. So, in listening to what's going on with David, he seems to be leaning towards an Ohio State, and then Tennessee and Georgia are still in the mix. But that's going to be a hard pull away, especially with guys who have already built the relationships with him. And Mason Short being one of the guys that, Mason Short is going to places with him and going to the Georgia visit with him. And Georgia still seems to have one of the outside shots looking in. Ohio State seems to be the latest movement, but we'll see how everything plays out with David Sanders there. So just an update on the Sanders situation. Again, 5-star guy, you would love to have him. But again, getting him to campus in the manner that they did was a very, very, it was a success story, no matter what happens out of this. Now let's look into Dawson Merritt. Okay, Dawson Merritt was another guy that, Nebraska had kind of made some traction on late. Again, another, he was kind of a verbal commitment. So what it seemed unannounced to Bama a while back, right? And then Nebraska kind of snuck in late and was able to get 3 visits with him. And then, because he put out the top 2, Alabama, Nebraska. And Dawson Merritt and his parents, of course, you saw his dad, David, posted, he tweeted at Cam Taylor Britt saying, "Hey, like, reach out. I want to ask you some questions." So Dawson's one of those guys that was really, really indicating that Nebraska was very much, or is very much, in the mix for him. Um, and he had glowing reviews of his visit to Nebraska, especially namely saying that, you know, the staff made him feel like, he was a priority, and also made his family feel like they were a priority, right? So his dad and mom were there. We saw some of the pictures of them, and that is the things that made, him want to take the visit to Nebraska and come to Nebraska. But they, in the end of the day, Alabama had such a connection built up with him. And again, Nebraska's not out on this, but I'm just trying to paint you the picture realistically and not with the red glass full, as much as I'd love to. But it's more looking like those connections with Bama that he's had for the long term are going to pay dividends. Again, Nebraska getting in after he seemingly possibly already had a verbal commitment to Bama that makes things a little bit tougher on that end. So Dawson Merritt's another guy that I don't necessarily think Nebraska is going to land, but keep an eye on him. We'll see what happens. Leaning more Alabama's direction as some crystal balls come in that way and stuff like that. So now let's go ahead, and I'll get into a commitment here. David Hoofkin. Now, David Hoofkin, of course, is the very interesting German commit. Now, a little backstory on David Hoofkin. I kind of listened to an interview they did with him. 6'7", 267 pounds. He started playing football in 2016, like 5-on-5 over in Germany for 2 seasons. He said he was asked to be on the German All-Star team and was the MVP of their bowl game against another All-Star team. Now, the way he broke it down in his career, because this was very interesting, because other countries, of course, do football way differently. It's not quite as developed as other places. So the way it works in Germany is they don't have school teams. It's more like club teams, is what he said. So it's like select ball for baseball. Instead of playing for your school, you get out to those select teams and you get around and play other select teams. So they got the club ball over there. Now, he said he moved to the highest level of youth ball that they had over there, and was on the youth national team, or won the youth national league in 2022. At that time, the University of Massachusetts UMass offered him. And then, due to personal reasons and COVID, he said he had to take a couple years off. Now he started back up about a year and a half ago, and, said the coaches really likes the way he moves. And of course, they're going to love his athletic traits. So you have a guy who was 2 years removed from football, is at this camp and showing himself, and still, gets an offer from Nebraska, is able to commit to Nebraska. Now, this is the perfect, I think, project player for Matt Rule. Again, he's 22 years old. So he's a grown man in terms of high school kids that Nebraska's recruiting. 22 years old. So he's going to be a guy that's going to come into the mix. And I believe he's going to be able to pick up some size and some strength very quickly. And listening to the scouts talk about him again, it seems like they originally maybe wanted him to come in as an offensive tackle. Again, kind of like he's a skinnier guy, but he's 6'7". So he would have been more like a Broderick Scholl type of tackle, where it's one of those guys you get pulling, you get these guys on the edges, and really you kind of use his physical attributes to his advantage. But it seems like more and more indications are that he's going to be potentially coming off the edge at Nebraska. It makes sense. 6'7", 267. He may not necessarily have all of the skills and the refinement that you need as a pass rusher, but he does understand the offensive line side of things. And when you're 6'7" on the edge and you have a quarterback, just you being there and getting your hands up is going to make them think about things. And if they have a throw going to that side of the field, so he might be a guy coming off the edge. He'll move around. They're probably going to just see what kind of tools he can develop. But yeah, it seems like indications are from watching him in his, drills that he looks to be like a guy who can develop as an edge rusher. And yeah, 6'7", man. I just can't get over the size there. And limited development. You got to think about it this way. They're probably not developing guys very well in Germany over there. So you get a coach, these coaches who can come in and hammer down some technique with him. And if he was able to develop that much and land an offer over here and get a spot over here with those coaches, just imagine with this staff who, majors in development and using physical attribution, teaching these players how to use their traits to their advantage. Skills can always be developed, but there's a ceiling to, certain height, athleticism, those type of things. So now let's get into the fun stuff. The commitments of Jamarian Parker and Pierce Muber. Now, I'm going to pull up some Jamarian Parker film for y'all. Of course, I did a film study on Jamarian Parker, so go check that out. But as I kind of talk through it here, I'm going to pull up some film for Jamarian Parker. They play an ad for me. So Jamarian Parker is a guy compared to Quentin Ives. When I was watching this film, I did a film breakdown, and at the end of it, I was like, tell me who you think he reminds you of, because to me, it was Quentin Ives. And you'll see it all over his film here. Let me pull it up here now that the ad's done. I don't want to give free ad revenue. Come on now. What does this look like? All right, so you can watch the indications here of what he does well. And let me pull my notes back up here on him. Like I said, sorry, I had to pivot last second to a solo show. So just kind of running this through here. All right, so it doesn't seem like my computer wants to load. Now, what Jamarian Parker does very well, he's very versatile, right? Jamarian Parker, he's quick on the edges. He averaged 11 yards a carry. He's out of St. Louis, Missouri. Of course, Missouri is a place that you'll see a couple names coming up on the visitors list from Missouri. It seems like they really want to get back into Missouri and make that a place that, they want to attack. And we're starting to see some of that pay dividends here. So, his speed, his vision is excellent. His receiving, he can even probably move over into a slot receiver. Now he's a little bit on the smaller side, could probably put on 15 to 20 pounds. But, in the college strength and conditioning program, that should not be difficult for him at all. So it's one of those things that we will get to see him put that size on in advance of that. Now let me add this back up here. And yeah, maybe choppy, but y'all see it. Lateral quickness. Now, one of the things that you'll see besides his breakaway speed is just how quick he is in moving laterally and in the zone run, zone read schemes that I've been talking about, that they were trying to find an offensive guard to be able to execute, or an offensive tackle to be able to execute. And this is the type of player that fits perfectly into that system. And so, like I said, he can run the slot. He can be utilized in many different ways. You can get him out on the passing game. You can run him up the sides, up the seams. Probably could stand to use a little bit more, like right there. You see his shiftiness inside the line of scrimmage. Like when he's inside the line of scrimmage, what he lacks for in size, he uses his feet to give him that advantage. And that's what a lot of players don't utilize. They don't utilize their feet in the mud, right? They try to just barrel their way through or whatever. He has a very good understanding of space, right? He can operate in a phone booth is what I like to call it. And when you can operate in a phone booth with vision, that is going to lend you very well at the next level, especially when you have a guy who can get outside like this and just breakaway runs all day. You want to be able to have a guy that can also navigate if you want him to develop more an inside runner, but he's going to be very much a slot guy, get out and receiving. See right here, like that's all lateral quickness to be able to get that. That is all movement right there to be able to get that. This is one of my favorite plays actually that I had broken down on this film. This one right here, because watch him use. He's going to use a cut in and a cut out to create some space here. So watch this one. Out, in, out, and finds a seam. Nearly untouched in that play, right? And that's all footwork. So really like what Jamarian Parker brings. The only flaws, like I said, when we're watching film, it's a lot of showing good stuff. So finding the flaws is difficult, but his size, of course, but that's going to be put on at the next level. But the physicality, when you're this much better than your opponents, you don't necessarily have to be physical when you can just run around guys or make guys miss constantly. So it isn't one of those things that necessarily is a weakness. It's just one of those things that we don't necessarily get to see on his film. There. So let me try to get into some of your comments before I continue. I know I'm going through a lot of stuff here, but I'm just trying to give you a quick rundown on all the recruiting news. Keep up with these Friday night light camps. Yes, it is. Post-graduation camp was interesting. Yep. Go Big Red. What's up, Cobain? I love your profile picture, by the way. Is that? I don't know why. I thought that looked like Errol Spence for a second. Long ways into bringing him in. Yep. Only about 2 more months, folks. Can hurry up. This is nothing to look forward to until then. Never mind me. He's not a fan of recruiting. Okay. Found that out. So I'm a recruiting nerd. I nerd out over this stuff. I don't know if y'all can tell, but I love recruiting. This is one of my favorite parts of the season. It's probably because football season brings so much pain. Let's see. Any 5 stars that are considering Nebraska. I actually will have a video coming out on the top prospects that are considering Nebraska. So stay tuned for that, Fongwei. Shoulder Auburn, Aiden Tony, yeah, and kind of I'm gonna go over. I have an offensive line, and there's also a breakdown of some of the Hawaii guys as well. I love that poly pipeline that they're building as well. You get a lot of guys, big guys, strong guys, athletic guys, especially linemen over there from that. So William, been missing the live show. Well, good to see you, William. Happy for you to join us. Lots of good players on the islands. Exactly, Fonway. There's a lot of talent over there, and it's nice to see, Nebraska continuing to build that poly pipeline. Rule 0-4 teams, the top 25 teams, like the worst record of okay. So we got. Well, I appreciate the comments, Mikey. If you came over here to troll, thanks. Make sure you drop a like. After Michael Terry visits Texas, I'm not so sure about him. The Michael Terry stuff was interesting. I don't know if y'all saw with Michael Terry or just in Texas in general, but they had the video posted where they had the Lambos on each side. The Michael Terry angle with Nebraska is interesting because Michael Terry has talked about how Nebraska wants to use him in more of a way that he wants to be utilized, whereas Texas doesn't. So Texas also has probably the most resources of any college football team and program in the country. And the only place that Michael Terry was considering leaving the state of Texas for is Nebraska. So you have a few things working against them, but then you have fit and scheme working for them. And so this is where it's hard to predict for a guy like Michael Terry, because what wins the day? Does staying in his home state in the state of Texas and going to play for Texas and being, not necessarily the guy over there, because you're a guy in a bunch of other, 5-star, or do you come over to Nebraska and you are kind of one of the big names in like a Dylan Raiola situation. Dylan Raiola could go to Georgia and be, a highly rated prospect in a group and a team of other highly rated blue chip prospects. Or you could come be the guy at Nebraska. And Michael Terry has that opportunity to come here and be able to probably play wherever he wants to and wherever they want him to. But they're, as a versatile team, he also sees that because he played 5 different positions in high school. And I did a film review on him. 5 different positions he played at high school. So when you talk about versatility, Michael Terry is the definition of versatility because he played all of those 5 spots at a very, very high level. Earl Thomas was another guy. I played against Earl Thomas in high school. Earl Thomas, many don't know this, but he played safety in the NFL and at Texas, but he played quarterback, punt returner, kick returner, safety in high school. Like he played everything. So Michael Terry, and also out of Texas. So Michael Terry reminds me of kind of like an Earl Thomas type of player where he not only plays every position, but he plays every position that he plays well. And that's really hard to do. Rule coach Baylor 11 wins and number 7 national rank play for the big. Yep, it's exactly. Just let them. Hey, let these guys come in here and just add. They can add some more views and help me out in the algorithm a little bit. So I appreciate it. If you haven't yet, please drop a like. Let me know what you think, and drop a like. It really helped me out. So voted coach of the year by his peers. I don't think they'll land either. High profile recruits need to start. That goes. What do you consider high profile? Now, do you consider the 5 stars to be high profile? Because then we get into a little bit of a different situation of how do we differentiate those. Sadly, in today's age, I'm afraid the more money these now relevant teams are going to throw at these players, the sooner you'll see improvement, which is a guy like Neon Dion could never be successful at a place with big pocketbooks. Yeah, don't get me started on that. What's up, Wilson? Appreciate you hopping in here. Wilson Dittman, of course. He's keeping the content coming out. So y'all go over there and check out his channel. He'll be back on the show. Mike, and we have Mike and Negative Mike. All right, cool. So we got Mike, and Mike's on his burner account that he trolls from. So, okay, cool. So now let's go ahead and get over into Pierce Muber. Now, Pierce Muber is another guy that I did a film review on. My most recent one was on Pierce Muber. So let me bring up some of his film and tell you what I've liked about watching Pierce Muber. And you'll see on his film, there's a lot of tight end as well, a lot of good blocking. This play right here, this spotlights his lateral quickness. Now, you see the defense that they play, right? The defense that they play is it's a cover one single high safety look. And they pretty much stay in that base. And that basically lets him, he's 6'4", 200 pounds. So it lets him be able to use his play identification, but his length and, he's sneaky speed. Like he's quick. He's a long stride type of guy. So he's not the type of guy that looks like he's running fast, but he moves fast. And now you see him right here. Now this in a 3-3-5, when you have a smaller defense, because you need a smaller defense in a 3-3-5, it lends to have an advantage to your smaller defenders because these guys are going to be out there. And the whole point of a 3-3-5 is to keep up with the athleticism and the speed of the modern college football world. You take a defensive lineman, add a defensive back. I've talked about that before. But having the traits of, because he's going to come in and be a linebacker. But having the traits of what he played single high safety up here, what that allows for him to do is it allows for him to be very smart in coverage. Because when you're the last line of defense in a single high safety look, you'll see what he can do here is he knows when to stay back and when to attack. Now, in a 3-3-5, when you are in man coverage, one of the first things that they're going to teach you is you do not want to jump in front of a route unless you know that you're going to get both hands on the ball and have a chance to intercept it. Now, you'll see it here a little bit in this play. He'll do that. Let me run it back here. Another thing that you want to look for in a 3-3-5 defense in a linebacker / safety or whatever, and it looks like they run a variation of a 4-3 here, which is very, very similar in terms of just the size and stuff like that. Well, it's not loading, but you'll see what he does well is you want to be able to not turn your head around the quarterback until you know you've caught up with your man. So if you're one-on-one in man, and you'll see it on his film, he doesn't flip his head around until he knows that, like, okay, I'm in a position where this guy's not going to beat me deep. And he does not get beat deep a lot. And what he does is he takes good pursuit angles, but he's 6'4", 200 pounds, know how to use his length to his advantage. But he also has tremendous ball skills and knows the route running of the receivers. And his ball skills come from his utilization on the offensive side of the ball. He also, excels as a blocker, which means he does the little things well. He works the little things. So he's a really good all-around player. And like as a jack or a rover, he's going to be a perfect fit for this team because as you saw throughout his film, he has a lot of run stopping ability, even coming from the single high cover one look, being the deepest defender in the field. A lot of times on the film, he's the first one to get down to the line of scrimmage, make the play. Now, not only does he make the play, he wraps up, he hits hard, he's very physical with it, and he finishes, right? So he comes into now this one right here, there's great catch right there. Through the contact, great catch right there. And then here's another one showing his ability to close out, and his timing is perfect. There's a play that's going to come up a little bit later showing his ball skills, but the tight end ability to be able to have the ball skills that he has at 6'4" as a rangy guy, that's going to help him because I've preached ball skills in defensive back film studies I've done time and time again because it's one of the most underrated parts of playing defensive back. That is, Nebraska struggled last year in turnovers. And with a 3-3-5 defense that is a high risk, high reward defense, you want to be able to force turnovers. So Nebraska wants to be able to force more turnovers going forward. So that you see a lot of these guys that they're getting have exceptional ball skills, maybe dual on both sides of the ball. Right here's a good one. Watch this. Jumps that, gets both hands on the ball, return after catch ability. I've watched this film too many times, as you can tell. I know. So, but that's what's going to make him good. And especially as a linebacker, being able to not only have to be the single high safety, you have guys to help you back, but he's going to be moving all over the place. And if you have a guy who's 6'4", Javen Wright, 6'5", this guy coming in 6'4" at your linebacker spot, it's going to be hard to throw it over the top of a lot of these guys. So this length is going to really, really help Nebraska. All right, so upcoming visitors. Now that I've talked about the guys that we have had committed, also Pierce Muber had visits to Minnesota and Kansas State, canceled those. Supposed to visit Nebraska June 21st, was committed before, but he'll be out here June 21st. So let me just touch on the next couple weekends of visitors, and I'm going to get into some of these prospects a little bit more specifically in some film studies coming up. So Douglas Utu, common spelling or whatever you want to say. I don't know how to pronounce some of these names. I'm really getting better. I do not like not being able to pronounce names just because I find it disrespectful. And but sometimes when you're reading these and not hearing the names, it's hard. So Douglas Utu, I guess, 93 rated interior offensive lineman, 4th ranked in the class. Now he's from Vegas, and he's got his offer list is big time. So Michigan, Washington, Bama, and Auburn. And but the thing about him, he's 6'5", 300 pounds. Okay. And so you heard me talking earlier about Broderick Scholl, and Broderick Scholl being one of those guys who was under 200 pounds, maybe 275, if I'm thinking off the top of my head, maybe like 6'3", 6'4", 275, right? Now you have a guy like Douglas Utu, who's an interior offensive lineman. He's 6'5", 300. However, if you look at his film, he moves very well for his size. And I feel like he is the type of guy who can move around the offensive line. You have smaller guys like a Kenyon Green. Kenyon Green played for Texas A&M, was drafted in the first round of the 2021 draft. Forgive me if I got that wrong. I think 16th pick. And he was a little bit of a smaller guy who could move around. Now, what you have in Douglas Utu is a 6'5", 300-pound guy that's not even in the college level yet, getting into that strength and conditioning program. And he already looks like he can move somewhat like a guard. So having a guy like a Douglas come in would be exceptional, because having versatile offensive linemen to go with a versatile offense is a must, because you want to be able to rotate these guys into different spots. Let's say you have a guy who's better at pulling than this guy, or a guy that's better at getting to a spot on this play than this guy. What they like to do is they like to run these plays and see the success rate and see who has the most success on a certain package, a certain play. Now, what is very underrated in this is we tend to think about offensive line as a very fixated position, right? But more and more we're starting to see, as these guys' athleticism and stuff like that increases, we're seeing these guys who are much bigger, who can run the interior defensive line, but also can move out to the guard position. And I think more and more we're going to start seeing that type of player, and hopefully Nebraska can land those type of players, because I feel like that's what differentiates these 3-star type of linemen from these 4-star type of linemen. I talked to you earlier about John Mills, right? John Mills is 88 rated 3-star, no slouch there, but seems a little bit more, he's a little bit slower. It doesn't seem like he'd be the type of guy that's as versatile as an Utu. And that's what separates these guys, is they're so developed in their skill set, their balance, and their footwork, that they can move around the line. You never know where you're going to play them or anything like that. So the constant fronts that you can give, the constant looks up front you can give, can really throw off defenses. So I think, so let me go through here, just making sure. High 4 and 5. Okay, high 4 and 5-star. We'll see. Like I said, some of these it's hard to know, because there's still visits left to do. We should get more of an indication. We just came out of the quiet period. We should get more of an indication as these visits start to come around in June. I hope we hold back scholarships so I have more interest when we beat Colorado. Well, we're going to be over on scholarships. The thing about Colorado's under on their scholarships. So there's that. Oh, there's the Utu. Okay, so negative Mike. I'm going to hope turn you into positive Mike here when I do my Douglas Utu video. So be on the lookout for that. I'll have updates as I get them. Don't even know what the Mustangs record was with the new coach. I can't tonight give up. Get that. These breakdowns of truth. Keep up. I appreciate that, Brandon. Thank you so much. Big boys, the conference starts with landing these big boys in the trenches. Moonbot, it's okay, man. You're late, but you're here. That's all that matters. All right. No, but you're right. Being able to get some of these guys in the trenches like this, and being able to win some of these battles against teams like a Michigan. You got a Michigan who's coming off of a coaching, switch. But even just the visual of Nebraska being able to win a recruiting battle over a team like Michigan, a team coming off a national championship. And of course, they put out the four-court press for these type of guys. That is going to be massive. And those type of things, we have the momentum, like our buddy in the chat earlier like to mention. We got Dylan Royale from Georgia, baby. But when you can also start sneak some of these other position guys, maybe a Michael Terry out from under Texas, that's a big, version of this. But, even Douglas Utu coming, beating out a team like a Michigan or a Bama, a Washington, like those are the teams that he had in his list. So it'll be really interesting to see, because those are the type of moves that, when you talk about, we're not getting the high profile guys, these are the type of players that if they commit, that'll move the needle on a lot of these other 2025 guys, so that'll move the needle on a lot of these other recruits. So that's why I'm saying there's a lot still up in the air, because you never know the type of movement after some of these guys maybe commit or things like that. So let me go over the next couple of visitor weekends and give you an idea of what we're looking forward to the rest of June. So June 14th, we're going to have, just to name a few visitors. Of course, the full lists are available, but we have Kristen Jones from Omaha. I talked about how important it was to be able to get like a Pierce Muber from Millard North and be able to really attack in the state of Nebraska. When I broke down the style of recruiting that we had under Frost, 7% of the roster, only 7% was from the state of Nebraska. And I believe Matt Rule's got that to about 32%, or at least 32% of his classes. I can't remember exactly, but 7% under Frost, which is the lowest we had. If you go back in the heyday of Nebraska, they were up in the 30-40%. So recruiting in-state, it's no secret Nebraska has a boatload of tight ends with extreme talent. So Christian Jones, 90 rated 3-star linebacker out of Omaha. He's a guy that you want to land, of course. But getting a guy like, a Pierce Muber in the class also helps, just in the off chance you can't land him. But Christian Jones, you definitely want to keep those guys close to home. Again, those are the guys that are typically most likely to stick with the program, because if something happens, they don't have to go home for a family emergency. And typically they are fans of the local team, et cetera, et cetera. So if you can build a team that they want to join and you get momentum in the state of Nebraska, that's going to be huge going forward. That can't be, I know we talk about Texas, we talk about Florida, but you got to recruit in the state. You got to keep your guys close to home. And Christian Jones is one of those. Corey Sims, another wide receiver. We talked about St. Louis, Missouri earlier, so I'm spotlighting him because he's a guy out of St. Louis. Again, this staff is starting to make progress in St. Louis, so be on the lookout for Corey Sims to see if they can continue to add to that as well. And Bryson Hayes out of Kansas, good film on him. I love the film that Bryson Hayes offers. He's a little bit lower down the list in terms of rating. He's a 3-star, I believe, an 86 rated 3-star. But love Bryson Hayes' film. I'm not sure. I think Wilson Dittman might have did a film study on him. So if you search his name and see that, go check that out. Then June 21st. So June 21st, Michael Riles. So I did a Michael Riles breakdown. Perfect fit for a 335, in my opinion. Defensive lineman, 6'3", 235. But he's from the area that I'm from in Texas, where I used to play high school ball. So I played out in the Golden Triangle, Beaumont, Port Arthur, Orange, about an hour east of Houston, 45 minutes east of Houston. So he's from Port Arthur. And so a lot of good talent out of that area. I've got a lot of intel on Michael Riles from people in that area. So if he commits, I got a lot of stuff coming for y'all on Michael Riles that you'll like. But very versatile, perfect for the 335. Just an all-around really, really good defensive player. Chase Lofton, the tight end out of Millard South, 6'6", 215. Now he's a guy who can probably slide out to X if you need him to. He can run the inside in the tight end. He is a guy who can go get you a lot of footballs. So Chase Lofton would be just another addition to this huge tight end class. And you can see how much of an emphasis, or this tight end room, you see how much of an emphasis that they're putting on tight end, because tight end's going to be moved around a lot in this offense. And we didn't get to see much of that last year, but as they start to stack these recruits and stack this tight end room up, we're going to start to see, they even mentioned Carter Nelson, he talked about when he posted the Walter Payton jump out over the line of scrimmage, he's indicating Carter Nelson maybe coming in the backfield and stuff like that. So you get these long, rangy, athletic guys, and you can use them in a lot of different areas. And then, of course, June 21st, Pierce Muber is going to be out for there. Houston Kahana Torres, a lineman, with Houston Kahana Torres, he's great lateral movement, strong, very, very strong with good balance, excellent at getting to the second level quickly, which, in the Big Ten, you need to be able to not only block at the line of scrimmage, but you have good defenders across the board. So you need some of these linemen who can quickly identify and get to the second level with that running back. He has great feet, which that's what allows him to get to the second level. And again, he's another one of those linemen that can play a little bit of everywhere. And then Jamarian Parker, of course, coming off the edge. Jamarian Parker, I did a film review breakdown on him. Excellent. Super excited about him. So yeah, let me get to some of y'all's comments here before I wrap the show up. And Frost, that is. Oh yeah. I was like, Moonbot, come on, man. Yeah, definitely not good. Again, Frost had 10 recruits from the state of Nebraska and 5 complete cycles. Matt Rule has 15 in just 2.5. That's insane to me right there. Frost also had no secondary or tertiary state to recruit from. He put his emphasis in Florida, and when those Florida teams got good, he could no longer get the top players from the state of Florida, had to end up taking secondary players. They typically didn't even stay with the program. A lot of different things going on under Matt Rule, making Texas a focus, but not only is he in Texas, he's competing with the biggest schools in Texas, and that's something notable. Live in Colorado, hate CU Buffs fans. I'm a huge Husker fan, but don't underestimate Buffs. Yeah, Dale, the only thing that I'm saying in regards to Colorado and the way they're building their team, right, is take this offensive line is a position you can't build through the portal. And I strongly believe that offensive line, and I went through 2020, 2021, and 2022 true freshmen, the top 50 linemen in those, and I saw the breakdowns of how many of those had significant playing time. And it was, I think, the most recent, like 2022, had 3 people play significant amount of steps. People talk about quarterback. Offensive lineman is the hardest position probably to come up and play at a high level out of high school, because there's so much development that you need to have. Not only that, offensive line works as a unit. So you really need those guys that have kind of been in the trenches together and have a year together, and maybe add a guy to that, right? Like a Micah Mazuka, for instance, like add a portal guy to that. But if you're sitting here trying to boom, 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 and just pick and piece your offensive line together, well, how do you expect them to go out and gel when football games start being played? They're going to have to gel as the season goes along. So offensive line is a unit. You need to understand your offense. You need to understand the guy to your right, to your left. You need to understand your quarterback's tendencies. And that's something that I believe can only be brought with time. And that's why if it was that easy, everybody would build a offensive line through the portal. But what is the thing that teams have the hardest time building? Offensive line. But everybody acts like, okay, let's just go ahead and pick all these guys out of the portal. We'll get some new players in here, get these old crappy players out of here, and all of a sudden we got a good offensive line. It doesn't work like that. Also, when you lose over 40 players in the portal, you regain 30-something. And I checked a month ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, they were at 72 of their 85 scholarship limit. You're under on scholarship. There's no depth. So I'm getting on my soapbox here, but that's why, and I'm not underestimating them. I'm painting a picture of what I believe just from what I've seen. Now I do believe Shadur is a really good quarterback. They're going to give us a good shot, but I'm not underestimating them. I'm trying to take a fair analysis of them. I understand what they are. But Dale, you could be right. 100%. You could absolutely be right. I do not know everything. I'm just giving my opinion on that. So that's what makes that game exciting. And I'll be out there. So if you are going to be out there, let me know, and I'll try to meet some of y'all. I think Cali are next in road once we start winning. Yeah, Cali's one of those that's hard to recruit, especially because the staff has ties to Texas. The staff has ties to other places. I'm not sure how many California ties, but it would be nice to start at least introducing. But Nebraska recruiting in Cali has been man, those players have not turned out well so far. Keyshawn Johnson Jr. is one of them, for instance, got kicked off the team or caught smoking weed on campus or with weed on campus or something like that. I expect Colorado to be about the same as last season. I think Colorado will be around 4 or 5 win range again. Colorado just lucky the great teams move on for Big 12 games. All right, we're ending on Colorado. You'll love to see that. That means we're itching for football here, guys. But again, I have reached out to a couple of Colorado guys as well. And when I do plan on bringing some of those guys on, and I do plan on bringing some other reporters from other teams on this offseason so we can get an idea of what our opponents look like. But when I do the Colorado episode, I will have a Colorado guy on. It will be a fair analysis, so don't think it's going to be biased or anything like that. So I do have that coming up for y'all. A lot of good stuff coming up for y'all. I've been a little bit, working on the rollout for the Voice of College Football revamp and stuff like that for the Twitter account and stuff like that. So I've been working on that, but now that I'm freeing up some time, I have a lot more time to be able to record these videos. So let me know who you want. When I wrap this up, drop in the comments. Let me know what video ideas you want, who you want next, film study wise, or who you want an update on. And I'll go ahead and get those for you. I'm trying to just make sure that the content is something that y'all want and everybody enjoys. If you want to go check out my 8-play film review, I'm thinking of starting the 8-play film study review, kind of like I did with Pierce Muber yesterday, where I spotlight 8 plays on the film to really show the strengths. So that way it's not a 30-minute film study. So like I said, just once I drop from here, let me know what y'all think in the comments of this video, and I'll plan accordingly, and I'll get those videos rolling for y'all in the future. And I got an offensive line breakdown coming up very soon as well. So a lot of good stuff planned for y'all. Wilson Dittman, you saw him in the chat. Go check out his channel. He'll be on again. Generation Red Ken, I'm going to have him back on again. So I got a lot of good stuff coming up for y'all in the next few weeks. And got some fun episodes planned. And let's hope the recruiting trends continue. We start to get more positive news coming out of these June 14th and 21st visits. So Scott, I will discuss that in a video coming up as well, just because I'm over on time here. I was going to get into the Ethan Nation stuff, but like I said, I ran out of time. So, everybody, I appreciate you dropping in here. If you haven't yet, please drop a like, drop a comment when we close out here. And I'll be back on with a guest next Saturday, unless an emergency happens. But shout out to my dog for being quiet the whole time. And I will see you on the next video. I'll probably be posting up tomorrow, Thursday. I'm getting my washing machine tomorrow, but expect the video probably Thursday. So I'll see y'all then. Peace out, everybody. Thank you.